Good evening, and welcome to Law Talk, the show that brings the law, the news, and the Constitution to you each month. Mark, what are we doing tonight?
Well, Jim, first we're going to talk about the Benghazi attack. There was a hearing, and the Secretary of State, or ex-Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, gave testimony, and there was some pretty interesting developments.
Oh, what I remember of this is actually she gave testimony on, I think, her last official day, or was the second to last day of her position as Secretary of State. It seems like a little late to give a speech or testimony on Benghazi if you're about to walk away. So how did that turn out?
Well, you're right. It was the last testimony that she would be able to be forced to give. It wasn't really, you know.
Wasn't it under oath?
I'm not sure that, but it really didn't seem like, you know, she had to answer questions like yes or no. It seemed like people couldn't be objective. She was evasive. So it seemed to me like it was kind of informal.
Well, wait a minute.
Maybe that's just the way it was handled.
Well, I understand this was put on in a very formal setting. They've been requesting her presence in front of this Senate committee for almost 60 days.
Right.
And she had gone through a series of events that delayed her presence at the hearing.
Well, there were tragedies. She was injured. Yeah, she was injured. She had a fall and had a concussion or maybe a stroke and cold and the flu. And,
oh, really?
And, you know, so
did we just open the medical Bible and determine what illnesses we can have so we don't testify in front of Congress? Was that the idea?
So anyway, what was an interesting quote? I mean, I guess she got in a tiff with one of the senators, and she said, well, 4 Americans are dead, which is, you know, a big tragedy, and there's a lot of theories about why that happened. But she said, well, was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk who decided they'd go kill some Americans?
Oh, wait a minute. As I remember correctly, we've gone through a whole litany of different stories about what happened. One, it was just a spontaneous uprising, and they were following the Egyptian overrun of the American consulate.
Protests, yeah.
But unfortunately, this was on 9/11, so that idea about a spontaneous, on 9/11, that calls into question. But then the second one was there was a video, and I understand that video was a pretty cheesy video showing some kind of people acting as Muslims, and somehow that offended them around the world when the video was played nowhere except on one YouTube clip. But then it turned into, it's an armed insurrection and attack of the consulate. So what story did Hillary Clinton give us?
Well, some people say, you know, she was being facetious about this. This was a joke. She was just kidding around. Kind of taking the whole thing lightly, that, you know, she's really not saying that some guys were just out for a walk with their rocket launchers and AK-47s and do a coordinated attack on a consulate. But, you know, it's hard to say. The first theory about the video seems a little bit bizarre. The theory that it's a spontaneous protest that turns into a rocket launching attack on a, you know, well-armed, fortified
allegedly well-armed and fortified.
Well, I mean,
it was a consulate that had the wall blown out by, dynamite had blown the wall out about a month earlier. So we already had a wall that you could march in an army that was never fixed because the Secretary of State, or it never got up that you had to fix the wall at the secure. And by the way, this is the country Libya that just went through a complete civil war where the leader was executed, where who runs the opposition is a terrorist state, and the president has very little power, and he sits in his little city, but the rest of the country is controlled by Qaeda and a variety of other terrorist groups.
Well, also I think that the local militias were supposed to provide protection.
Well, local militias are the same people that were involved with the attack, and the local militia, even if they were to provide protection, obviously they were out at a different location, maybe sunning themselves on the beach, but they missed this. But the problem.
So basically, we have three theories. The first theory was that it was a protest, 9/11 protest,
right?
And then that got a little out of hand, and it turned into an attack. Second theory was a video that enraged people, so they did an attack. And the third theory, whether we don't know whether to take this seriously or not, even though maybe it was under oath, maybe it was a formal session, maybe it's just a joke. I mean, maybe Hillary's thinking of the whole kind of thing as a joke, and she's saying it's because protest, or because some guys out for a walk who decided they'd go kill some Americans. So maybe it was just a joke.
I think that was being facetious. Yeah. I don't think she was being serious about that. But the problem is that the head of the CIA gave testimony where he said that we had visual on this within the hour from the start of the protest. They had full knowledge that this was totally coordinated with movements of terrorist groups coming in from different angles, using different weapons, including suppressive fire with mortars. Not quite, I'm out walking the dog with my AK-47. So that whole little snippet that I'm making a joke or being sarcastic about why do we care routine. I do remember I watched that testimony. I was shocked when I saw the Secretary of State make comments as though the lives of 4 Americans mean nothing to her just because it happened a little while ago. It's fairly shocking. And I'm sincerely hoping that John Kerry takes his position a little more seriously.
Well, a lot of people would disagree with you on that. But what's interesting about some of the things that came out, okay, on 9/11, in 2012 at 5 p.m., the Joint Chief of Staff, Chairman General Martin Dempsey, and Defense Secretary Leon Panetta had a pre-scheduled meeting with the President at 5 p.m. that day. They gave him a 20-minute briefing on the Benghazi attack. And then the president said, "Well, it's up to you guys. I mean, in other words, it's up to the defense secretary. It's up to the Joint Chief of Staff." So he said, "You guys do whatever you do. It's up to you." And the president had no more input into this situation after that, apparently.
Yeah. Well,
also, the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, apparently didn't have any contact on this thing at all. So it was up to those folks. Then there was 8 hours.
Wait a minute, are you talking about the aides to the Secretary of State? It was up to them to make a decision?
Well, apparently the Joint Chief of Staff, General Martin Dempsey and Leon Panetta were in this meeting. And they say their story is that the president says it's up to us. Right? And then the president was out of it. And so, and then for the next 8 hours, there was no military assets deployed to help or any action at all.
Well,
so,
do you realize
except maybe for some surveillance?
As you should know, there's been testimony of generals that are in the region that actually stated very clearly there was assets less than an hour and a half away. They were never called. It was also true that they were visually watching it live. It was also true that they actually had unmanned drones they could have flown in from Jordan. So there's a whole lot of stories here about what could have happened, may have happened, would have happened. But that's not the point.
But if I remember correctly, Hillary said that they weren't watching it. They didn't see it live.
Yeah, but see, unfortunately, they have video of people watching it from the moment less than a moment after it started. And the problem here is that it was 9/11. Come on. I mean, 9/11 is kind of a sacrosanct day in our history, especially as it deals with terrorists.
And another thing that came out, that Panetta and Dempsey knew at that 5 p.m. meeting it was a terrorist attack. They didn't think it was a video. They didn't think it was out people for a walk. That was something that was kind of apparently manufactured later.
Well, wait a minute. I have a question then. Then why was Susan Rice, the Secretary of the UN, sent out on the Sunday shows 5 days later and said the story, it was all a video, no big deal, we got the guy with the video?
Because Hillary Clinton doesn't like Sunday talk shows.
Hillary Clinton should have been on the Sunday talk shows.
No, she doesn't like doing that Sunday circuit.
Yeah, so wait a minute. But wait a minute. Her not liking the Sunday talk shows, this is a Secretary of State issue. And I know Hillary wants to run for president, and she's a great statesman, and I don't have any questions about that. The problem is, on this subject, there was many flaws in her decision-making. Was she even notified that this was going on to her ambassador, who works directly under her in Benghazi? Was she even notified? No. Was the president even aware of what's going on? Maybe. Because the next day he said, oh, terrorists, and when I was in the Rose Garden. But the problem I'm seeing here is a categoric misrepresentation to the people over what actually happened. Now, for whatever reason, that there seem to be so many stories about what happened, it's more important that we look to the future, to other embassies, so we don't run into the same problem in the future just because there's nobody at the helm when something serious happens. And that's what I see. I see a complete disarray of those in the chain of command. And it should have been left up to the military, but the military had no orders to do anything.
Well, I think that, in defense of Secretary Hillary, she might say that even though, let's say, the defense secretary knew and the Joint Chief of Staff knew it was a terrorist attack, maybe she didn't. Yeah, she wasn't in that meeting.
I'm not questioning the fact maybe she wasn't called. Maybe she wasn't available. Maybe she didn't get that phone call. Whatever reason.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, this is a good learning lesson as we go forward so that other embassies, given the hot topic of the terrorists right now. I think it's just a go forward look, and I think on that end we should just move on. What's our next subject?